How big is the problem? What's the scope? More than half of all women will experience violence from their boyfriend or husband, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Don't confuse longevity of a relationship with love. My wife and I just celebrated our 50th anniversary, and it's a marvelous time. We love each other. My wife commented that she loves to hold hands after all these years. We started out doing that when we were dating, and we still love to hold hands. We sit in church and we hold hands at appropriate times when we can. We take a walk, we hold hands, and all of that. I went out on one call to a man who had died. He had a heart attack, and as I was talking with his wife, we had done some preliminary things. We called the funeral home. We're waiting for the funeral home to arrive, and as I was talking to the wife, and she had a friend who was with her, I asked them, how did you meet, and what did your husband do, and how long have you been married? And I like to ask those kinds of questions to get people talking and kind of returning to more of a normal state after they've had the trauma of someone dying in their home, and get them talking about that person. They love to talk about him, but in this case, her reactions seem just a little off to me. Now, my understanding of grieving is very flexible. It's grown through the years. I recognize that everybody grieves in an individual way, but even taking that into account, her reactions seemed just a little off to me. And as we talked further, they'd been married 50 years. And I thought, well, the reaction should be a little different than what I'm seeing. And then she said to me, after pausing and kind of thinking for a few minutes, silence, she said to me, "I've got my life back." And I said to her, what do you mean you have your life back? And she said, "That man, we've been married for 50 years. And he beat me every day for 50 years. I've got my life back. I can do things. I'm set free." So don't confuse longevity. The fact that people have been married for a long time doesn't mean there's not this kind of abuse, behavior, and pattern going on. DV results in more injuries requiring medical treatment for women than rape, traffic accidents, and muggings combined. Those are the women who are treated. A lot of women are not treated. They don't go to the ER. There we go. 30%, as I said before, more than 30% of women murdered in the U.S. are murdered by their husbands, their ex-husbands, or boyfriends or ex-boyfriends. In 2014, 16,700 people reported domestic violence crimes to Colorado police. 16,700 incidents reported. I'm sorry, not incidents, 16,700 people. There may have been multiple incidents, but 16,700 people reported crimes to the Colorado police departments. The number was much, much higher because most DV assaults are not reported. Why not? Why not? We need to learn to see police as an ally. Romans 13 describes the civil magistrate as what? God's servant to do you good. God's agent for justice. And the word that's used there, God's servant, is the word diakonos. The word from which we get what? Deacon. Deacon. Do you ever think about the police officer on the street as God's deacon? Now, he's not a church deacon, but he's God's deacon. He's God's servant. Whether he's a believer or not a believer, the function he's performing, the duties he's carrying out, serve the purposes of God in justice. And therefore, we need, as believers, we need as churches to look at the police as an ally in the work that we do. We had a case in our city of sexual assault that took place in a church building during the service. A young woman went to a restroom, and a man followed her into that restroom. It was in a relatively remote part of the building, and he assaulted her. She reported it to her parents. She was a teenager. She reported it to her parents, who reported it to the church elders. The parents reported it to the church or to the police. The police investigated. The detectives went out. The church interestingly had video cameras, security cameras set up all over the place. They had video of this woman going into the bathroom, the man going in after her, but the church refused to share it. The church refused to share it. The detectives wanted the elders to announce to the church what had taken place in the hopes that someone would come forward and say, I know that man. I saw that man. The elders refused to announce it to the church. Why would they do that? They were concerned about the reputation of the church. They were concerned that if it got out into the community, if it got out into the news that a sexual assault had occurred in their building, that would affect people coming to their church. It would affect their numbers. And they were not willing to do that. So there was resistance to the police. The detectives came to me and they said, Chaplain, you got to be a liaison with us. You got to help us out. So I listened to them. I talked to the elders. And then I wrote a paper on Romans 13, in which I outlined the responsibilities of the civil magistrate as deacons of God. I submitted that to the elders, asked them to read it, and meet with me again. They did. Their attitude changed. We brought in the detectives back in. They turned over the video. They announced it to the church. The individual was known. He was a relative of somebody in the church. He didn't go to the church normally, but he was a relative of someone in the church. They identified him. He was arrested, successfully prosecuted, and sentenced because of the cooperation that took place. Now, I find, as a chaplain, that's part of my role, is to be a liaison. And churches have different reasons for being resistant to police. The liberal churches tend to look at the police as the personal army of the establishment in suppressing and oppressing people. Evangelicals, conservative churches tend to look at the police, again, as agents of the state, and we don't want the state crowding into our business. And so there's a great deal of mistrust. We've done a lot in our city to build trust between the churches and the police department. And I think that is a healthy thing, and we need to look at the police as allies. How great is the danger? Very great. And it's a danger to everyone. Domestic violence destroys individuals, it wrecks families, it tears apart churches, it undermines society. And the two most dangerous times are, one, when a woman reports the abuse to authorities, whether it's church authorities or law enforcement, that's a dangerous time because the abuser is being exposed, and when a victim tries to leave the relationship. If a woman decides, I'm getting out, that's a very dangerous time because the man is losing control. And what does he want? Control. And if he can't have control, he'll take control by taking a life many times. Don't be naive. We have had church shootings, people who were shot at churches, sometimes over domestic violence. We've had cases of a man coming to a counseling appointment and shooting his wife and shooting the counselor. Who commits domestic violence? 90 to 95%, as I said before, are men, but some perpetrators are women. Those who commit domestic violence don't have a DV stamped on their forehead. There's nothing by which you can outwardly identify them. They usually lead typical lives on the surface, except they believe that they have a right. In some cases, they believe they have a God-given right to control the lives of the people who are close to them. Spousal abuse, child abuse, elder abuse are all aspects of domestic violence. Abusers come from every walk and every socioeconomic level. Rich people can be abusers, poor people can be abusers. It doesn't matter. The individual may be outgoing and friendly, even charming. In fact, the abuser usually is somebody that is an extrovert, usually is somebody who gets along very well, maybe in the church, maybe a Sunday school teacher, may even be a pastor, may have a spiritual aura around him, may use the scripture as a club to beat people into submission. So, given those kinds of issues, why do women stay? When I began going out to these scenes and dealing with the victims of domestic violence, spending time with the women who were the victims, I would ask them, why do you stay in this relationship? And some of the answers I got: she loves her man. She thinks this is normal for every family. Maybe she grew up in an abusive home and married into an abusive relationship, and this is just the way men are. In her view, this is normal. This is every marriage. She doesn't realize that this is abnormal, that this is wrong, that this is sinful. She just accepts it as the way it is. She was told by an authority. I asked a lot of women, did you tell anybody? And I was amazed at how many of the women told me, yeah, I told somebody. I'd say, who did you tell? You know who they told? I told my pastor. I went to my pastor and told him. What did your pastor say? Universally, the answer was, go home and be a better wife. Go home and be a better wife. You must be provoking your husband. You're not satisfying his expectations. Women are manipulated into believing that it's their fault, that she provokes him. He's this way because I'm the way I am. It's my fault. Women are isolated, and they stay in this relationship because they have no support from anyone else. Why did they stay? She may be embarrassed to admit to anyone else what is going on. She may stay because she has no financial means to do anything else, no transportation. She may be staying because she's afraid for her life or for her children's lives. She may hate the violence, but enjoy the makeup period. Some guys, after a beating, they feel sorry, quote, for what they did, and they give presents. And that period, called the makeup period, may be enough to keep someone in that relationship. And again, men use the Bible as a club to dominate. It's interesting that when God speaks to women in the Ephesians passage, He tells them to submit to their husbands as unto the Lord. But submission is a voluntary act. The wife is told to submit. The husband is not told to subjugate her. The husband is not told to enforce her submission. Submission is something that she gives because she loves. And if he's loving her as Christ loved the church, she'll be more than happy to submit voluntarily in that relationship. Why does she stay? She may be afraid of being alone. Remember last night we saw that the number one fear of people is being alone. And one woman told me, at least one woman told me, a mean man is better than no man. And so she stays. She has no idea of how to find help and find resources. She may stay because she sees no other options. She may stay because she has nowhere to go.